Hello, everyone. Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. I'm Michael Reddington, and today it is my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Terry Tucker. Terry's a former Division I college basketball player. He's a former law enforcement officer and SWAT negotiator. He's a former high school basketball coach. He's a cancer warrior, professional speaker, author, and his most recent book is called 4 Truths and a Lie. And I am very happy today, not only to share his experience and his thoughts, but his stories and ideas that can all help us as we continue to grow in our personal leadership and communication journeys. So one of the first things that we're going to dive into is what are his 4 truths that we can guide our lives by. It's a very important part of the conversation. Eventually, we're also going to talk about that one lie as well. What's the one lie that we can all fall prey to, and how do we overcome it? Along the way, we're going to talk about lots of great concepts, including how do we learn to control our mind, the importance, and how do we develop curiosity. And he's going to share a really interesting take on how he learned how important it is to put people at ease when you're communicating with them. He's a very engaging guy. It's a great conversation. I'm super happy to share it with you today. Thank you for being here for another episode. While you're here, please just take a quick moment to like the show, subscribe to the show. Certainly leave us your feedback. We'd appreciate it, a review. Thank you so much for all your support. We really do thank you for coming back week after week. And while you're online today, please check out our sponsors. You can check out humantel.com. That's where you can read all of their research and learn all about their best-in-class online training to begin developing the skill set of recognizing when people's emotions are shifting by accurately identifying changes in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. When you're there, enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off the training of your choice. For the professional interviewers, go to certifiedinterviewer.com. That's where you can get all your questions answered about the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation and the International Association of Interviewers. It's all there for you at certifiedinterviewer.com. And while you're online, please check out inquasive.com. That's where you can learn more about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more to help them apply the skills and techniques necessary to encourage people to tell the truth in our high impact conversations. We really appreciate you being here for another week. Thank you so very much. So now, without further ado, I introduce to you Terry Tucker. Terry, it is great to meet you. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
I am great, Michael. Thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
I am as well. For me, I'm a nerd. So part of the fun is preparing for these conversations and what are people's backgrounds and where do they come from and what's their expertise or their approach. And then I look at yours and I'm like, oh, we could do the athletics. Oh, we could do the negotiation. Oh, we could do the coaching. Oh, we just had to battle through cancer. So many different roads we can go, and I'm sure they'll all get weaved in. But I think where I would like to start, if it's okay with you, is with your book that for people who are watching the video, they can see on the shelf behind you, 4 Truths and a Lie. Thankfully, we're not playing the game, 2 truths and a lie, but 4 truths and a lie. So you have your 4 truths and 1 lie that can guide or impact our lives. I don't want to say it incorrectly. So to get finally through the longest introduction ever, I'd be grateful if you could please first walk us through the 4 truths that are so important to understand in our lives.
Sure. So the 4 truths are things that I talk about on podcasts all the time. And so I ended up putting them into a book, and I have them on a Post-it note here in my office. I see them multiple times during the day, so they constantly get reinforced in my mind. So here they are. First one: control your mind or your mind is going to control you. Second one: embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one I look at kind of as a legacy type of truth, and it's what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And the fourth one is, as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I kind of call these 4 truths sort of the bedrock of my soul. I just think they're a good place to start to build a quality life from.
I don't see much space to argue with that. I think that's pretty fair. Let's start with the controlling the mind. Whether we call it mental toughness or focus or resilience, we can pick a label. It probably doesn't matter. But I think for many of us, especially in the realm of communications, how do we control our mind, stay focused on the outcome, navigate our emotions, build relationships, all of these things? Throughout your very diverse background with all the different things that you've accomplished, how have you learned to work hard and control your mind so you don't let it control you?
So I was fortunate to sort of learn this early on, although I didn't know that I learned it. I'm 6'8". I played college basketball, but I had 3 knee surgeries when I was in high school. And I remember when I went back playing basketball after those knee surgeries, my brain was putting all kinds of negative thoughts into my mind. Things like, hey, you're probably a step slower since your surgeries, and college coaches aren't going to be interested in recruiting you. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I'm still playing at an elite level, and coaches are still reaching out about the possibility of playing for their college or university. I learned early that I needed to sort of change the narrative. I mean, Michael, we all talk to ourselves, whether we admit it or not. And the Cleveland Clinic, and I'll use the Cleveland Clinic numbers, there's all kinds of people that say how many thoughts pass through our mind every day. The Cleveland Clinic says we have about 60 to 70,000 thoughts that pass through our mind. 95% of those thoughts are previous thoughts, things we thought about before. So on any given day, we have roughly 3,500 new thoughts that pass through our mind, and our brain operates at a speed of about 1,000 words a minute. But given all those thoughts, your mind can still hold only one thought at a time. And when I went to college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina. It's a military school. And my sophomore year, we had a president by the name of James Stockdale. I don't know if that name rings a bell at all, but Stockdale was the highest ranking prisoner of war during the Vietnam conflict. He actually won the Medal of Honor for his organization of prisoner resistance. And then later on in life, he was Ross Perot's running mate when Perot ran for president of the United States. And I remember being at a gathering where Stockdale was, and I didn't spend a lot of time around him. He was the president of the college. I was a cadet. But somebody asked him, who were the people that survived that brutality, that torture, that abuse? And he said this. He said, well, let me tell you the people who didn't survive. He said it wasn't the big, strong, tough guys who thought that they could handle any kind of abuse or torture. And then the next thing he said really kind of surprised me. He said the other group that didn't survive were the optimists. He said these were the men who thought that they would be let go or rescued by Thanksgiving, Christmas, or Easter. And he said when those holidays came and went and they weren't let go, he said those people died of a broken heart. He said the people that survived were the people who understood what they could control and controlled it. And according to Stockdale, it was basically the thoughts in our mind and the breathing in our lungs. That's the only thing we could control. Everything else was at the whim of the Viet Cong when they got tortured, when they ate, when they got their care packages and things like that. And Michael, I think that's where we kind of get into a problem, where we try to control things that are outside of our purview. And I remember my dad taught me this. He said, whenever you're dealing with something difficult, he said, take a piece of paper and write down everything that's bothering you, every concern that you have. And he said, once you've got it all out on a piece of paper, go through and cross out everything that you don't have control over. He said, whatever's left is where you can spend your resources controlling the things that you're able to control.
That's tremendous perspective. I appreciate you sharing that story, and certainly one that I can't directly relate to. And I was reminded too when you're talking about the control piece. When I worked for WZ, the interview and interrogation consulting company, I was preparing for a case, and I was talking about things that were out of my control. And Dave, one of the co-founders of the company, this kind of similar exercise, sat down with me. He's like, well, why can't you control that? Why can't you control that? Why can't you control that? And what he helped me realize was that, yeah, some of these things were quote unquote out of my control, but they weren't out of my ability to influence. Yeah. And so control what you can control, influence what you can influence, let go what you can't, all of those things, but understanding the difference. I feel like as you went through that, you gave us illustrations for control your mind, embrace pain and discomfort, and don't quit. I feel like you signed up those three right there. Is there anything that you would want to add from a don't quit perspective or from a embrace pain and difficulty perspective?
Yeah, let me give you a quote from Stockdale, and this is kind of become known as the Stockdale paradox. And this is what he said. He said, "You must never confuse faith that you will prevail in the end, which you can never afford to lose, with the discipline to confront the most brutal facts of your current reality." So you've got to believe that you will overcome whatever, doctor tells you, "Hey, sorry, this is terminal. There's nothing you can do about it." Okay, that's your perspective. And that may be the case. I very well may die from this disease, but I've got to believe that I can that I can push through it, that there's something I can do. I use the disease category. I mean, a lot of times, we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now, but it's just, you've got to have faith that you can handle whatever it is you're going to handle, whatever you're going to come up across, with the understanding that, yeah, I'm probably going to get my butt kicked here, and I always go back to years ago. Northern Iowa played Kansas. Kansas is a blue blood basketball team, been around forever. They're amazing. They're dominant. It's Northern Iowa. It's like, who are you guys? But Northern Iowa ended up beating Kansas on that night. And I think there was a lot written about their belief and their belief system. And it's like, yeah, I know they're good. I know they're probably better than us. And probably 9 out of 10 times they would beat us, but not tonight. Tonight's our night. We're going to beat that. And it's that kind of understanding, that kind of mentality that you have. I understand where I am. I'm not being, I'm not thinking that I'm in some fairyland or something like that. I understand the reality, but I also understand that I have a chance of being successful tonight.
You kind of tie that together with the previous Stockdale story, not the blind optimist, but also not the defeatist either. I understand that this is going to be rough, but within my power to control and set my mindset, there are opportunities for me to create breakthroughs here or to fight through the pain and difficulty. So to touch on the fourth one, the legacy we leave behind, I'm not going to quote it right. The legacy we leave behind is what we weave into the hearts and minds of others. I think that speaks to, and I mean this in a very positive way, lots of things we hear about, it's not about what you say to other people, but how you make them feel and, all these other things. That's what they hang on to. So you've been a basketball coach. You've been a SWAT hostage negotiator. You've had your family roles. You've had to talk to doctors. You've been in a lot of different situations. For you, what have those situations taught you about how to make other people feel what you need them to feel in some of these critical moments?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I guess let me start out with this. You're old enough to probably remember Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, who educated so many young people on public television, including me growing up. There's a story that when Fred Rogers died in 2003, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: "Life is for service." And Michael, I think that's so important. I mean, there's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with the students. And the idea is you go out, get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you go deep with another human being. So, and I'm just going to make this up. You get on a bus. First question: "Hey, how you doing?" "I'm fine. How are you?" Second question: "What do you do for a living?" "Oh, I'm a doctor." Third question: "Have you always wanted to be a doctor?" They could say, "No, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened." Or, "My mother was a doctor but died of cancer at 40, and so I'm honoring her memory by becoming a doctor." Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their purpose, their mission in life. And we don't go deep with human beings anymore. Social media lets us just stay on the surface. Everything's great. Everything's wonderful. We don't go deep with human beings. So I think it's incredibly important to be curious. I used to, my wife's going to kill you for killing me for telling you this story.
She's going to kill me for you telling me.
No, not you. She's going to kill me. She was in the financial services industry. And, we would go to the obligatory Christmas party every year. And I used to always say to her, look, I'm going to go in here. I'm going to find 5 of your colleagues. At the end of the night, I'm going to come out and I'm going to tell you, how they met their spouse, where they went to college, where their kids go to school, everything about them. I said, and then Monday morning, when you go back to work, they're going to come to you and tell you what a great guy that I am. And I would do that. And the interesting thing is, I would ask all these questions, but rarely would anybody reciprocate and say, where did you go to school? How did you meet your wife? How many kids do you have? Where do your kids, any of that? And it's that curiosity. And I did it kind of as a joke, but I also was a very curious person. I love trying to understand what makes you tick and why you think the way you do and things like that. That's just that was something when I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. They always told, be curious, dig deeper and things like that. And I love doing that. I love those interactions with other human beings. And I mean, Michael, 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember that you and I were here. But what I want today are those deep connections with other people. And when I say deep connections, I want honest connections with other people. I don't want to be, I'm here trying to get something from you. No, I just want to know about you because I'm a curious individual. So that for me was why I interact with people. I mean, I'm a loner by trade. I don't like hanging around with people, but people fascinate me. And I love to understand what makes them tick.
I'm really happy to hear you say that because selfishly, I'm a loner. When we moved into our property, the people had horses before. I mean, it's not that big a property, but they used to have horses, so they would walk them from where they were boarded to their property. So they had a gate across the driveway. Like, you got to close it with yourself. Like, it's not fancy. And when we got there, my wife was like, "Oh, this is great. The gate will help keep the dogs in." I'm like, "No, it'll help keep people out," which it actually doesn't, which is a story for another day. But the same thing, like, I would often rather be alone, but yet I'm completely fascinated with people. You talked about being curious and how important that is. I do think too, that sometimes, like, when people are chatting us up, like, hey, you're talking about where are they from, how they meet their spouse, where their kids go to school, all those things. Like, people didn't ask you questions. And some of it, I wonder, they weren't curious. And some of it, like, and I don't mean to insult them, but did they just care enough? Like, yeah. I got to be at this party too. Because I say that because I find myself in situations where people are talking to me and sometimes I'm like, I know I'm supposed to ask, how about you? But I'm going to be honest, I don't really care right now. And I gotta kind of force myself through that. But if we're not trying to build these connections and instill those feelings in others, then we'll fall short. You talked about being curious, and especially in SWAT negotiations, being curious. I've never been a SWAT negotiator, but from an interviewing standpoint, having that mindset of I'm always curious, I'm always learning. There's a dot out here that no one else has found or connected. And if I can do it, then that creates the breakthrough. So one kind of off the wall question about negotiating, and then I'll come back with a more serious question about negotiating. So when I was in interview and interrogation, one of my teammates and very good friend that some people listening are going to know, Brett, is 6'4". I think he's 6'4". He's a big dude. And I remember talking with him often about how he managed his size and his posture and spacing when he talks to people, because he's such a big dude. You're bigger than him, which I will remind him of the next time I talk with him. So it's 6'8". I imagine a lot of your hostage negotiations are at a distance. They're over the phone. It's not like you're standing in front of somebody. But in general, with your negotiation experience, like, you might have the hostage taker might be on the phone, but there could be a lieutenant standing next to you. There could be somebody else standing next to you that they're trying to talk to you, influence, work with you. How did you learn to manage your size and your delivery while you were engaging in these high stress conversations?
I'm going to answer this sort of two ways. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. I was 6'8", am 6'8", 230 pounds. So when I would walk into a room, people would stare. I mean, people would stop and stare. Now I'm still 6'8", but I don't have a left leg. It's been amputated because of cancer, and I'm in a wheelchair. So when I wheel into a room now, the same thing happens, but it's for a different reason and things like that. So, and I feel it's incumbent upon me. It really isn't, but I feel it's incumbent upon me to put those people at ease, to make a joke, to do something that kind of like, oh, okay, he's still a human being and stuff like that. But it's different, and it's really. My wife and I have one child, a daughter, and she's 6'3". She played basketball at the Air Force Academy, and when she was growing up, it was like, Dad, people are staring at me. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. Just go with it. You had to kind of teach her that there's nothing you can do about your size. You just have to own it. Own the room and things like that. And you're right. When we were negotiators, yeah, I may be on the phone talking to somebody or on the headset talking to somebody, but right next to me is another hostage negotiator listening to everything that's going on and passing me notes, because we have 4 or 5 other hostage negotiators, what I used to call kind of work in the room. They're trying to gain intelligence, because a lot of times I have no idea why we're here. What precipitated this? What went on? So you might get a note from the person sitting next to you saying, don't talk about his mother, because they found out that he had a huge fight with his mother. He grabbed a gun, barricaded himself in his bedroom. Oh, okay, that's good to know. So it's not as easy as I'm just dealing with this guy. You're right. There's a lot of things going on, and it wasn't so much my size. It was the fact that there were so many things going. Oh, I'm trying to talk to this guy. What did he just say? Oh, you're passing me a note, or and yeah, the lieutenant's sitting right over my shoulder, listening to what's going on and stuff like that. So you kind of had to get in. Kind of like in athletics, you had to get in your zone. You kind of had to get in your, okay, thanks for the note. Okay, I don't care if the lieutenant's there. We're going to do our thing. So it was trying to focus on something that was critically important, because this obviously guy might kill himself, but it was also putting things out in people's faces. I mean, we would say to people, if we thought somebody was going to shoot themselves or kill them, we'd say it. Are you going to hurt yourself? Are you going to shoot yourself? And I've heard so many people, and maybe you have this same experience, especially with suicide, where people are like, oh, yeah, I saw the behavior, or he was giving stuff away, or he was talking about death or whatever. Yeah, I thought that was peculiar, but I didn't want to say anything because I was afraid I was going to put the idea into their mind. It was like, you're not going to put the idea in their mind. I mean, if I said that to somebody and they weren't going to hurt themselves, they would kind of fire back like, no, you idiot, I'm not going to do that. Or, oh, you see me. You see what I'm going through. You just opened a door that allowed me now to talk about this and things like that. So it was really trying to get in your zone, like I used to do when I was an athlete, and try to concentrate on what I was doing with all the other stuff that was going on.
So many profound thoughts in that answer. And obviously I can imagine what it's like to have a leg amputated because of a disease and those things. So I want to be very respectful.
No, you can say anything you want. Make a joke if you'd like.
Well, I've been known to take a joke a step too far accidentally before. So I'm going to be careful here. But what I loved about that was when I was above everybody, I had to put them at ease. Now I'm kind of sitting below everybody, but I still have to put them at ease. So it's finding that common thread. The situation may be different, but the common thread about how do I connect with people, and maybe this is a terrible analogy to make in a height-related conversation, but level the playing field, so to speak. And so that type of insight and intuition, I think, is very important, because we can all learn from that. And something that helps us in one scenario helps us with another. So I think finding that common thread is important. I'll get back to the flow in a minute, but even as you're talking about with the potentially suicidal person, I had somebody on a while ago who was a suicide attempt survivor, and he talked about the same thing. He's like, just ask people. The number one reason why people don't ask, like, oh, I don't want to put it in their head. It's already in their head. Like, don't, if you're worried about it, get them open, get them talking about it. So I want to reinforce that. But you also talked about being seen, which gets back to one of your 4 truths. Like, what are we weaving inside other people? Oh, they actually experience, they see me, I have value, they care about me. So that weaves back into what you were talking earlier. My athletic career ended in high school, so I don't know what it's like to play Division I sports. When you think about taking your athletic history and then spinning those lessons forward into your career, into your medical battles, all of those things. What did you take away from being an athlete that helped you either be more prepared or more successful in those other contexts?
I think especially team sports can teach us so much, can teach us how to be a good teammate, to handle adversity, to handle success, although in college didn't have a lot of success in that regard. But you can learn so many valuable lessons that transfer into anything that you do in life, because you're going to interact most likely with other human beings. And the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. And so what lessons did I learn as that, dealing with adversity, having pain, moving through pain, understanding that pain is sending you a signal. And you know what? I can't play tonight because, I have my knee or whatever it is. It was just growing up in an environment. I remember one time I was guarding this. We were in practice. I was guarding this guy, and you could tell he was getting frustrated. And I knocked the ball away from him, and he turned around and he slapped me right in the face. And this was one of my teammates, and it was like, it was all I could do not to punch him right in the nose, but it was taking a breath and saying, okay, he's frustrated. I get it. He's still my teammate. I still love the guy. We're still, pulling on the oars in the same direction. Don't hit him in the face. And that was, I still remember that today. I still remember him doing that. It's been almost 45 years since I've been playing college basketball. It's learning those things that then transfer to all the adversity you're going to have in life, whether, it's with a child, whether it's with cancer, whether it's with, my mom's 90 years old and declining and things like that. How do I handle that? And how do I handle it, as you mentioned, in a respectful way? And how do I handle it when sometimes you need to be honest with somebody and tell them something that they don't want to hear? And you learn all that as part of team sports. And I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to do that through high school and college. And hopefully that is played out in my life.
I can appreciate all of that. I have a young son, and even just getting him into sports, you see the moms and dads, but mostly dads, that are like, they want their kid to be the best 7, 8, 9-year-old on the field, court, mat, whatever. And I'm like, actually, I want my kid to grow up to be a highly functioning adult, and I think this might help him along the way. So if he turns out to be good, but that's not why we're here. Those other lessons are so far more important. And in my sarcastic mind that I can never fully get out of, they're probably old thoughts. They're not necessarily new thoughts. It's a track that I find myself in. You say a guy slapped you in the face, I'm like, well, I give him credit for reaching that high.
Well, you got to remember, I was playing with guys that were
true.
And that was so, in high school, I played high school ball in Chicago and played against a lot, Isaiah Thomas, played against Michael Jordan his freshman year at North Carolina and things like that. So you're on that level. The giants are walking around all over the place. So yeah, it really, for him, he was about my height too. So it really wasn't that big.
Well, in my head, it was funnier.
I understand.
I do want to come back to, well, let's just do it now, because I keep circumventing the lie that I want to make sure we don't forget, because there's 4 truths and a lie. But you talked about playing. You also coached. And if I understand correctly, and if I don't, put me in line, you played Division I men's basketball, and then you turned around and coached, among other things, high school women's basketball. And one of the things that can be difficult for people who are good at anything is having the patience and composure to teach other people who aren't as good and don't see it the same way. People give Larry Bird a hard time for his coaching stint. I feel like I need to defend Larry Bird to the death, but that could be one example, hypothetically speaking. So when you think about translating your talent and skill from player to coach, but then also from men's basketball to women's basketball, how did you turn your personal lessons into a successful coaching experience for the young women on your teams?
So I started to coach high school basketball at a school that these girls were cellar dwellers. They were terrible. I mean, and they didn't know what they didn't know, and it was changing a culture. It was changing the expectation. I used to wear a suit to every game, and the parents were like, why do you wear a suit to the games? I said, because I want these girls to understand that this is important, and things that are important in life, you want to look your best, you want to act your best, and things like that. So I'm changing that culture, and I'll give you a story. So we're in the middle of a high school game, and I point to one of the players on the bench, and I'm like, go in for so and so, and she shakes her head yes, and I go back to coaching, and I can see out of the corner of my eye the scorer's table, and there's nobody there. So I turn back to her, and I'm like, get in for so and so, and she shakes her head yes, and I go back to coaching, and again, out of the corner of my eye, I can see the scores table, and there's nobody there. So a third time, I turn back to her, and I'm like, get in for so and so. Michael, now she's like shaking me off like a big league pitcher, like like, no, I don't like that sign. I'm like, what? And I have never experienced that. So I bring her to me, and I'm like, oh my God, we're going to have a counseling session in the middle of a high school basketball game. So I said to her, why don't you want to go in the game? And the tears start down the cheeks. And I'm like, why don't you want to go in the game? She said, Coach, my friends are in the stands, and I'm afraid if I make a mistake, they will make fun of me. And I said, what about your responsibility to your teammates? You come out every day at practice. You work hard to get better personally, and you work hard to make your teammates better. What do you owe them that you come out every day? You're part of this team. I said, there's no uniform wearers on this team. You just don't get to put a uniform on and sit on the bench. This is important. What are you going to do? And eventually I convinced her to go into the game that she had a responsibility to her teammates. But I'm like, never in my entire playing career, boys are like, Coach, yeah, I want to play. Well, you're playing against, the Chicago Bulls. I don't care. I don't care how terrible I am. I still want to get in the game. Girls play for a different reason. Girls are competitive, don't get me wrong, but girls play for the relationships, for the camaraderie that I don't think boys did. I mean, yeah, I was friends with guys on the team, but it wasn't so much about the camaraderie. It was about, can we win? Let's do that. So it was certainly different for me. And it was a growth thing for me. I had to learn, I would be devastated after a loss. I'd be on the bus. I'd be, taking notes and stuff. They'd be in the back of the bus talking about the television show they were going to watch when they got home. I'm like, don't you guys care? Yeah, they cared. But again, it was more about the relationships. They're all sitting in the back of the bus together with each other, making those, I think for a lot of them, long-term relationships that I don't necessarily think I had when I was playing as a boy, as a guy.
All very interesting points. How did you adapt your style to that?
I did things. I remember we had this one drill, and it was half of them were at one basket at one end of the court, and half of them were at the other. You had to basically throw the ball off the backboard and then sprint down to the other end, and the ball had to keep going. And Michael, they couldn't get it. They were constant, the ball would drop or somebody would do, and I kept that same drill for an hour and a half of practice. Now, occasionally I would be like, all right, Mary, shoot a free throw. If you make it, we're moving on to the next drill. Mary would miss the free throw. It's like, all right, line up again. And I remember some of them, even my assistant coaches were like, what are you doing? I said, I want them to know they can do this. I want them to do this. I don't care what I had for the rest of the practice. I want them to know they can do this. And I kept telling them, I'm like, I know you guys can do it. I've seen you do it before. All right, let's go. Blow the whistle. And they would do it, and they would mess up. Line up again. Let's go. All right, make a free throw. And this went on for an hour and a half, and they were exhausted. But they got it at the end. And they came up to me afterwards, and they're like, Coach, I didn't think we could do this when we started. And I'm like, I knew you could do it. I just needed you to know you could do it. So it was things like that, changing that culture. It's like, nope, we're not going to move on because you weren't successful at this. I need you to be successful. I don't care if it takes an hour and a half. And it did. It took an hour and a half. And, a lot of things we didn't cover that day in practice. But I needed to change that paradigm. I needed to get them out of their heads to say, yeah, we get killed all the time. It's like, no, you can compete. I want you to understand that.
And again, that ties back into your legacy is what you weave into others. So that's a great example. And it comes down to, I love what you said from a coaching perspective. And really, I can imagine any context, somebody might be able to come up with an exception, but I need you to believe that you can do it. So it's not that I can see it. I need you to know it. I need you to believe it. And that's what this experience is all about. And I think that's true. Coaching, parenting, leading, on down the line is instilling that self-belief in others. So that ties us back into the four truths. Let's finally, for people that are like, will you please tell me the lie half an hour later? What is the one lie that could be holding us back and how do we overcome it?
Yeah, the lie is how we identify ourselves. What we believe is success. And Michael, I'll throw this out at you and give me your thoughts on this. I've seen so many people in my life that feel that they are born empty. And that when they get out of school and get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. I got to have the best education. I got to make the most money, drive the nicest car, have the latest gadgets and gizmos. And what I found is we're not born empty. We're all born full with whatever we need to be successful, however you determine that word in your life, already inside us. We just need to pull it out and use it for our benefit. So our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, and of our communities. And when you make that paradigm shift in your life, when you go from it's all about what I get to it's what I give in life that's important, it's amazing how that works out. And there's a great fable. I don't think this ever probably really happened, but there's a great story about Alexander the Great, probably at the time one of the greatest conquerors in the world. Alexander the Great's dying, and he calls his counselors together and he says, I want you to carry out my final three wishes. He said, my first wish is I only want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave. My second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And my third wish is I want my hands hanging outside my coffin. And one of his counselors steps up and says, excuse me, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most powerful man in the known world. You could have anything you want. These seem, again, my words, kind of goofy wishes. I said, why do you want these? He said, number one, I want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave because I want people to understand that no doctor cures anybody. They just help the body to cure itself. You need to be cognizant of all the things we know about health, whether it's nutrition or exercise or sleep or stress or whatever. You need to be responsible for your own health. Secondly, he said, I've spent my entire life accumulating wealth, power, influence, and yet none of that goes with me beyond the grave. I will be in the same small plot of land that the pauper who has nothing laying beside me. And then he said, finally, I want my hands hanging outside my coffin because I want people to understand that I came into this world empty-handed and I leave it pretty much the same way. And I just think that's a great story to illustrate the lie. It's not all the stuff you accumulate because there's always going to be something else you want, something else that you'll never get that itch scratched, that you'll never be satisfied. But if you turn it around to what can I give others, and again, going back to what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of others, that's really your legacy. That's how you overcome the lie.
Great illustration, fantastic point. And I want to double down on that a little bit because I know you also write and talk about, to that same end, how can we replace the fear and doubt and some of these negative emotions that feed the lie? So if we do feel like we're trying to fill this empty space and some of that is driven by these more negative approaches or emotions, how can we overcome and replace those and find more positivity and more peace in where we are and what we're doing?
We talk, especially, I talk a lot about suffering and things like that. And I don't think, at least I've come to the conclusion, we don't suffer in vain. Whatever difficulty, whatever adversity you're going through, it's not something that happens just to happen. I think there's a lesson. Yeah, find the meaning in your misery is something that I talk about. And I'll give you another story. This involves a nurse that was taking care of me. I was on a clinical trial drug for 4.5 years. And this nurse, young nurse, about 25 years old, already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit when I first met her. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And Michael, she comes in, she's like, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm not sure how to tell it to you. And how do you respond to that? I mean, what are you saying when somebody, I'm saying, well, I hope you decide you want to tell it to me because I'm sure I would enjoy hearing it. Next couple hours, she's in and out doing her thing. Finally comes in, sits down. She's like, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my family. I was going to quit nursing. I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you. And I see how I had a very violent reaction to my medication. And she said, you keep coming back. You keep showing up. And she said, then I went back in your file when I was caring for you and I read you had your foot amputated, you had your leg amputated, you went through all these different drug trials. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just the way I was living my life, I was just coming for treatment. Just the way I was living my life had such a positive impact on that woman. So anybody who's listening to us that think, oh, things are hard, I can't do this, this is difficult. I can promise you there are people out there watching how you handle your adversity and would give almost everything they have to walk just a mile in your shoes. So don't think your story doesn't matter. Don't think what you're going through doesn't matter. It does matter. You're supposed to learn something, and then hopefully you will turn around and teach that or amplify, give an example of how that's how you're supposed to live a life. Or that's how you can live a quality life. Again, not what you get, but what you give to other people just by being who you are.
Another tremendous example in your point about people are always watching. Like they're always watching. It's true. If you're a parent, if you're a teacher, if you're a coach, if you're a leader, if you're in the community, people are watching and we're setting the example, the bar, the floor, depending on which way, but we're setting that example. And really in that illustration, and again, I can't begin to put myself in your shoes and imagine what that was like, but even in that quick example, as you were talking about your charge and your experience, controlling your minds, to grind through the pain and the difficulty, to never quit. And in doing so, weaving your legacy into the hearts and minds of others. And now this woman is still nursing as a result. So as much as I would love to continue the conversation, I feel like I don't know that we can end in a better place than that. So I'm going to go on a win here with you. For the people that have been listening and motivated and really identifying with your message, where can they go to stay connected with you and continue to learn from you?
Yeah, I have a website, a blog, Motivational Check. Just go to motivationalcheck.com. Leave me a message. I love hearing from people.
I'll make sure it's in the notes for sure. It has been a pleasure meeting and speaking with you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your insights in an hour of your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me on, Michael. I really enjoyed this.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too.
Terry, thank you for such a great conversation. I appreciate you sharing your personal stories, of course. Thank you for all the insights you gave, and you really gave me a lot to think about, and hopefully all of the listeners and viewers as well gave me a lot to think about in regards to how I can connect with other people and use these experiences to create a bigger impact. Thank you. You said so many things that are really worth highlighting, but I love from a coaching perspective, when you're talking about your high school players, I need you to know that you can do it. Such a great perspective, which leads to that second thought, which was people are always watching. How are we handling adversity? How are we handling the challenges we have? Because everyone around us is watching and learning from that. And doubling down on that a little bit more, finding meaning in our misery. All very, very powerful thoughts and considerations, Terry. Thank you so much for sharing today. And thank you all for joining us for another episode. I really appreciate you being here. Hopefully you got just as much out of that conversation as I did. While you're here, please just leave a quick review, like the show, share the show, subscribe to it, please. We do appreciate all your support coming back here week after week. And don't forget to check out our sponsors. You can go to humantel.com and enter the code INQUASIVE25 for 25% off their best-in-class online training to recognize when people's emotions are shifting by identifying changes in their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. For the professional interviewers, CertifiedInterviewer.com is your destination to get all your questions answered about both the International Association of Interviewers and the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. And finally, please check out Inquasive.com to get your questions answered about the programs our clients ask us to custom facilitate for their senior leaders, sales teams, HR teams, and more to teach them how to uncover hidden value in all of their high impact conversations. Thank you for being here for another week. We really do appreciate it. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.